The day I found out I was pregnant was also the day I discovered my husband already had a child with my best friend, and that they were planning to erase me from existence in exactly 7 days. Put yourself in my place. What would you do first? Leave me a comment, because everyone would make a different choice, and I genuinely want to hear yours. That day began with two tiny red lines. I was standing in the bathroom, still wearing my heels, about to head to the airport, my hand trembling as I held the pregnancy test under the dim yellow light of our Brooklyn Heights apartment. Two lines. Clear even, not smudged. I stared until my eyes stung, and then tears just came out without warning. The first feeling wasn't fear or panic. It was something strangely warm rising from deep in my stomach, like something inside me had quietly latched on and demanded to exist. I leaned back against the cold brick wall, smiling like an idiot, wiping tears as I already imagined myself on a video call with Jackson from London that night, holding up the test to the camera. Surprise. He'd freeze for a second, then smile, then probably say something like, "We're going to be parents?" I had already written the whole script in my head, frame by frame, as if life would simply follow the timeline I had drafted. The watch on my wrist buzzed softly, reminding me it was time to leave for the airport. I was flying to London today to give the biggest keynote of my career. I carefully placed the pregnancy test on a piece of tissue, took a deep breath, fixed my mascara, tucked my smile into my chest like a beautiful secret folded into a pocket, grabbed my suitcase, and called a cab to JFK. The morning highway was thick with traffic. I sat in the back seat, eyes drifting over rows of buildings, bridges, and signs, while my mind ran ahead. Check-in, security, email clients, tweak the last slide, decide what to tell Jackson later at the hotel. My hand rested instinctively on my stomach, though there was nothing to feel yet. Just a word printed on a stick. I opened my bag, intending to take out my passport for one last check, just to be sure. My hand rummaged through the main compartment, then the small one. Wallet, laptop, notebook, pen, lipstick. No familiar blue cover. A chill shot down my spine. I searched again, more carefully, nearly emptying everything onto the leather seat. Nothing. The passport was on the nightstand. I remembered clearly setting it there after checking the visa last night. Damn it, I muttered, looking up at the dashboard clock. If I turned back to Brooklyn, I'd cut it close for check-in. If I didn't, I'd miss the flight, miss the keynote, miss the opportunity my company and I had been waiting for. For a few seconds, everything spun. Then my brain switched to risk calculation mode. Maybe still on time if traffic eased up, maybe a later flight, but not sure if there'd be a seat in my class. Turn back. A voice in my head said clearly. The car veered sharply at the next exit. On the way back, I texted Delia. Might have to catch a later flight. Prepare a backup plan for me. She replied with a string of worried question marks, and I only sent, I'll explain later, don't worry. All I was thinking about then was time. Boarding time, presentation time, the tiny life not yet visible in my belly. I had no space to consider that forgetting my passport might be the only delay that would end up saving my life. The car dropped me off in front of the familiar brownstone steps. I rushed up, grabbed the doorknob out of habit, and it turned easily. Unlocked. I froze for half a second. I'm the kind of person who checks the lock twice before leaving, sometimes even goes back to twist it once more, just to be sure. Maybe I was too excited this morning, I told myself, feeling lucky I'd come back. I pushed the door open. The hinges let out a faint creak into the silent house. I hadn't even reached the stairs when I heard Jackson's voice from the third floor. It was relaxed, drawn out, a little excited, a tone I rarely heard when he spoke to me. He laughed, a deep laugh, and stretched the word sweetheart, the way you do only in private messages. Sweetheart, I told you, she's really that stupid, signed every document and even thanked me for helping her handle everything. Look, the hardest part's done. I froze in the hallway, hand still gripping my bag strap, heart clamped by an icy fist. Part of me wanted to scream, to storm upstairs, to throw the pregnancy test at him and shout, What the hell are you doing? But the other part, the one trained after years in boardrooms, analyzing logs, mapping threats, told me to stay silent. Listen. I moved up the stairs quietly, instinctively skipping the third step that creaked, and reflex carved into me after 5 years in this house. I stopped right beneath his office, where the sound was so clear it felt broadcast straight into my skull. How are you and the baby? Yeah, just 7 more days, sweetheart. 7 days, and we'll fly to Costa Rica. Sell the Cobble Hill house, transfer the company's shares, withdraw everything, clean out the trust fund. After 5 years pretending to love that cold, controlling bitch, I'm finally free. I gripped the banister, fingernails digging into the wood until they bled. Rory, my best friend for 18 years, the person I sobbed to when my parents died, the baby in my stomach, the one no one knew about yet, curled up as if it understood it was conceived inside a 5-year lie. I stood there, in the house that used to be home, listening to each word drop like a knife. My heart stopped beating, but my mind was sharper than ever. The woman who once trusted her husband completely, who cried out of joy at becoming a mother, died right there on that staircase. I didn't know who the new version of me would be yet, but one thing was certain. From this moment on, Jackson was no longer my husband. He was a threat, and if I wanted to survive, I would have to handle him like any other high-level threat. My parents died together in a car crash on the Brooklyn Bridge just 3 days before Christmas. I was 28, law degree in hand, not yet ready to take the bar exam, when I suddenly had to sign as the heir of ThornSecure, the tiny cybersecurity firm my father had built from scratch in an old warehouse in Gowanus, with just 3 employees and a few local clients. My boyfriend at the time, the man I thought I would marry, broke up with me through a text on the day of the funeral. I'm sorry, I don't have the strength to go through this with you. Everyone expected me to sell. Competitors sent offer letters the same week as the Shiva. They were certain I'd fall apart, cry myself dry, and sign the sale papers just to be able to breathe again. I didn't sell. I threw myself into it, even though I didn't know anything beyond signing meeting minutes and pretending I understood what I was doing. Jackson appeared in the 6th week after the funeral, at a legal conference in Manhattan. I had just finished giving a talk about data privacy regulations, my voice still shaky from crying the night before, my eyes still swollen. He stood up and asked a question so sharp the whole room turned to look. Afterward, he waited for me in the hallway, holding a steaming paper cup of coffee. Are you okay? The first words he ever said to me. He was handsome in a quiet way, black hair with a touch of silver at the temples, gray-blue eyes that looked straight at you, not past you that night. He cooked pasta in my small Brooklyn Heights kitchen, opened a bottle of red wine, and let me cry into the shoulder of his dress shirt without saying a word. In the months that followed, he stayed. He cooked when I worked until 3 in the morning. He brought files into the bedroom, sat next to me reading without complaint. He never said, choose, me or the company. He only said, you can do this. I believe in you. He listened when I talked about meetings, clients, the hollow space my father had left behind. He asked the right questions, didn't flatter much, but his small gestures made me feel less alone. Sweeping the roof after a storm, calling the plumber, sitting with me on a Sunday afternoon to go through tax notices I didn't understand. One evening at Finger Lakes, on a rough wooden bridge glowing in golden sunset, he knelt down and asked me to marry him, and I, exhausted but finally feeling seen after months of grief, said yes, without thinking. The wedding came quickly after that. Small, warm, held in my mother's garden in Cobble Hill, just family and a few close friends, and Jackson cried when he saw me walking down a makeshift aisle between rows of white chairs, a moment that made my heart explode with happiness and relief. I backed away from the staircase with the same caution I'd used to approach it, each step so light it felt like I was slipping out of my own body. I avoided the floorboard near the coat closet, sidestepped the familiar creak by the wooden panel next to the front door. No sound. No trace I moved through my own house like a shadow until my hand found the lock and eased the door open just enough to slip outside. The door clicked shut behind me with a soft tack. I walked toward the car in measured steps, even though every nerve in my body screamed for me to run. When I put the key in, my hand shook so badly I had to try twice before the door opened. Sitting behind the wheel, I stayed still for what felt like minutes, staring at the brownstone through the windshield. The house I once called home now looked like the scene of a crime. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb at a normal speed, even though my heart urged me to floor it. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they hurt, but the pain kept me calm. Jackson believed I was at the airport. He believed I was about to check in, clear security, and board my flight to London. That misunderstanding was my only advantage, and I had to protect it at all costs. I couldn't go home. Couldn't call him. Couldn't make a single move that would reveal his carefully planned timeline had just fallen apart. Because I forgot my passport. I drove aimlessly through Brooklyn for a few minutes, just trying to escape the truth that had slammed into my face like a sentence. The phone screen stayed blank. No calls from Jackson. Of course not. In his mind, I was already out of the country. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a cafe in Park Slope, 3 neighborhoods away from Brooklyn Heights, somewhere Jackson would never think to look. My phone sat in the cup holder. I picked it up, the screen blurring as tears finally came. Not sadness rage, hot and raw, burning behind my eyes. After the wedding came months of struggle, estate taxes, contractors, lease renewals, sorting papers, counting every number in the books I barely understood. Jackson volunteered to help, fixing faucets, making repair lists, suggesting we consolidate a few accounts to make management easier. It sounded reasonable, even thoughtful, while I was busy handling a major client. So when he handed me a stack of authorization papers, explaining them quickly and gently, I countersigned without reading the fine print. I trusted him too much, was too tired, too busy, and only thinking about keeping the company, keeping the house, keeping what my parents had left, never realizing that together we had just handed someone else the keys to a legacy whose locks I hadn't even learned to understand. I had built my entire life with that man. I had trusted him with everything that mattered. I had believed in a future that now existed only as a record of my own stupidity. But crying wouldn't save the company, wouldn't save the house, wouldn't get back what had been stolen. I needed to think. I needed to calculate. I needed to become the person Jackson never imagined I could be. Sitting in that parked car under a tree, I knew one thing for sure. I was at war, and the first rule of war is that the enemy must never know what you've heard. Inside the cafe, only a few people sat hunched over laptops. I chose a corner table, one with a clear view of the door but invisible from the rest of the room. My hands were still shaking as I unlocked my phone. I needed help, but from the right person. One wrong move could destroy everything. I inhaled deeply 3 times, forcing my heartbeat back to the pace my brain needed to function. Years of crisis management had taught me this. Panic is the enemy. Assess first. Strategize next. Execute last. The first call I made was to Delia. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sharp and professional, as always. "You're boarding now, right? What's wrong?" "I need you to do something and don't ask a single question, okay?" A brief pause, long enough for me to hear her rearranging every assumption she had. 6 years working with me was enough for her to know when something was truly serious. "Okay, tell me." "Cancel London. Call the organizers and tell them I have a family emergency. At the company, tell everyone I arrived at the conference and can only be reached by email." Another silence. "Ashley, are you okay? Are you safe?" "I'm safe," I said, forcing my voice not to tremble. "I'll explain when I can. Just do exactly what I said." Delia lowered her voice. "So you're in London? Got it. I'll handle everything." I hung up before my throat could close. One step done. The harder call was the second one. David. Not an assistant, not a friend, but the only person left who had worked with my father since the earliest days of building Thorn Secure. After my parents died, he was the one who held me up every time I thought I was going to collapse. David answered on the first ring. Ashley, you're not on the plane? What's going on? I need to meet you, now. Absolute discretion. Park Slope. The cafe at the address I just sent. Your voice. This is serious, isn't it? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and ordered a cappuccino, just so the barista wouldn't think anything of me sitting there. David arrived earlier than expected. He pulled out the chair across from me and looked at me like I'd just crawled out of the wreckage of something. Tell me everything. And I did. Every word. Every sentence. Every fragment of the conversation from the third floor that had just blown my life apart. When I finished, David didn't speak for a few seconds. He opened his laptop, made a quick call, and gestured for me to hand over my phone. Within minutes, he had accessed the full transaction history I hadn't checked once in the past 18 months. Ashley, he said, in a tone I had never heard from him before, part fury, part heartbreak. These transfers. Every 2 or 3 weeks, there's a small one. 1,400, 1,900, 2,800, all routed to a trust company called Havenwood Trust. I recognized the name instantly. It was the same name Jackson had whispered sweetly while planning to destroy me. The ring of David's phone sliced through the silence. He answered, then froze, listening. His expression shifted like he was processing something shocking. He tilted his head to hold the phone between his shoulder and ear, while his fingers moved across the trackpad so fast I could barely keep up. Then he stopped. Ashley, Jackson's been to prison. I couldn't breathe. He turned the laptop toward me. The criminal record appeared clear as day. Grayson Wolfe, convicted of investment fraud in Connecticut 8 years ago, served 2 years, released in 2018, immediately changed his name to Grayson Wolfe to scrub his record clean and avoid background check alerts. Every move was calculated from the very first second, from the moment he, accidentally, met me. I looked at his mugshot, the same black hair, the same gray-blue eyes that once made me believe I was loved, and felt something inside me shatter completely. Everything in me went cold. Not fear, but the kind of clarity that comes only when you've crossed the edge of pain. David didn't say another word. He flipped to another tab and turned the screen toward me. An old photo appeared. Jackson standing beside Rory at a bar in the Lower East Side, dated March 2017. She was in a tight red dress, her arm around his neck, smiling wide. Below it was the caption, 6 years ago today, hearts. I went still. 6 years ago. Not a year ago, like I had once believed. Not a mistake in a weak moment, like men always claim. No. That was before I even married Jackson. Before he moved in with me. Before the nights he cooked dinner, checked in on me, wiped my tears when I couldn't yet process my parents' deaths. David looked at me, his voice low and heavy as iron. They planned this before your parents even died, Ashley. I could hear my blood rushing backward in my ears. David opened another PDF file. A hotel invoice from Montauk, June 2018. The reservation name, Grayson Wolfe and Rory Klein. Same credit card, same single night, right before Jackson flew back to New York, and, accidentally, met me. David closed the laptop softly, but the click echoed like a gunshot. He looked me dead in the eye, voice gone hoarse. They didn't just steal your money, Ashley. They murdered your life before you even realized you were living inside a script written 6 years ago. I didn't cry, I just nodded once, slowly. Then I unlocked my phone and opened the old photo album. The first picture I'd ever taken with Jackson. His arms around me in the kitchen. Me smiling so hard my eyes were almost closed. The caption I had written. Found my forever. I deleted it. No hesitation. David looked up, his eyes holding a single question. What do you want to do next? I met his gaze. My voice no longer trembled. It was so cold I barely recognized it. I want them to pay. Every dollar, every day, and every tear they planned for me to cry. David smiled. For the first time that afternoon. A sharp, blade-thin smile. Good. Starting today. And in that moment, I knew. The 7-day war had begun. That night, I checked into a small hotel in Lower Manhattan under Delia's name, to erase any chance Jackson could trace me. That name on the receptionist's screen was like a layer of disguise, thin enough not to draw attention, but thick enough to pull me out of sight from the man who thought he was a genius. I had barely lain down on the unfamiliar bed when my phone buzzed Jackson. A message popped up, followed by a bright red heart emoji. Miss you already? I stared at it. He performed so well, he could make his own victim feel guilty. I set the phone face down on the edge of the bed and looked up at the ceiling, dotted with faint patches of light. Sleep wouldn't come. Couldn't come. Every minute that passed, my mind replayed that invisible recording from the third floor. His voice, the voice of the man I once called my husband, piercing into my ears like needles. The hotel room was so quiet, I could hear the traffic below. Every honk, every late footstep. I thought about my mother, alone in the old brownstone in Cobble Hill, the house she'd lived in for 40 years, where my father built the bookshelves by hand, where I grew up, where every family memory lived inside layers of red brick, and the man I trusted was planning to erase it all. Thinking of that, my chest tightened. I looked at the clock. 3:27 a.m. A sharp pain twisted in my lower abdomen. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't. I had exactly 6 days left. I tried to ignore the pain, tried to coax myself into rest. Tomorrow, the war would still be waiting for me. Morning came gray, light seeping through the hotel's heavy curtains. I sat up under the weight pressing down on my shoulders, like someone had laid a block of concrete on my chest. I showered quickly, changed into dark clothes, tied my hair back neatly, and left before the hotel restaurant even opened. I drove home in silence. The stretch from the bridge to my familiar street had never felt so long. When I stopped at the corner, the house stood there, calm, untouched, as if nothing had happened. The front door was locked, quiet. I waited until Jackson was gone. Then I went in. The smell of his detergent still lingered on a shirt somewhere, the faint trace of morning coffee. It all made my skin crawl. I went straight up to the third floor, Jackson's office. On his desk were a few folders he assumed I'd never touch, because for the past 5 years, I never questioned anything, never read the fine print of our finances. I had let him help. That, it turned out, was the first trap. I took a deep breath, sat at his desk, and began turning every page. My signature was everywhere. On documents I didn't remember signing. On papers Jackson had handed me when I was busy, tired, or just home from meetings. A thicker sheet slipped out from one of the folders. The corner was marked with a yellow highlight, Power of Attorney. I saw my signature right beneath it. Clear, strong, unquestioning. Myself, I whispered, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I signed my own life away to him. I took out my phone, photographing every document, every word, every seal, not missing a single page. I sent the entire set to David through an encrypted folder. Once done, I set my phone down and buried my head in my hands. For the first time in 2 days, I blamed myself, whispering to the 4 walls that had once been my home. I opened the door, I let the wolf in, I handed him the keys to everything, and even thanked him for it. I pressed my forehead against the cold floor, inhaled deeply. Then I stood, placed the folders back exactly where they had been, not shifting a single millimeter. The smell of old paper, printer ink, and the wood of Jackson's desk blended into something so familiar, it made me sick. Every page in front of me was a wound I had carved myself, a record of blind trust. A crack Jackson had widened, with a perfectly planned deception. And now, I was no longer the woman who had signed those papers. I was the one who would tear through every layer of his lies. One by one, The next morning, I went to Martin Hale's office on the 42nd floor of a glass tower by the East River, everything inside gleaming, covered in expensive art, the kind of place that makes you feel safe the moment you step in. Martin met me in a private conference room. No assistant, no coffee, no small talk. His eyes, for the first time since I'd known him, weren't entirely calm. When I placed the folder on the table, he gave a single sharp nod. Let's begin. I laid out the documents one by one across the glass surface: the forged power of attorney, the trickle of small transfers, Jackson's prison record, the photos of him and Rory from 6 years ago. I need to know if Thorn Secure's been compromised, I said, my voice steady like I was reading a risk report. If he's already taken my personal assets and my mother's house, then the company is only a matter of time. Martin flipped through each page, his face darkening by the minute. This forged signature, it's perfect. Someone would have to know Thorn Secure's internal structure to fake it this precisely. He opened his laptop, pulled up the original company files for comparison. My head rang as I saw line for line, seal for seal, an exact match. If he files these in the right place at the right time, Martin said, his tone dropping low, he could petition the court to freeze company assets pending ownership verification, or claim a share in a divorce proceeding. He could even declare himself a legitimate shareholder. My father's legacy, 5 years of rebuilding, everything hung in the balance because I once trusted a con artist. What do we do now? I asked. We file an emergency order today. Freeze all transactions tied to Thorn Secure shares or property. I'll have the court order within 2 hours. Leaving Martin's office, I stood in the marble lobby of the tower, watching people hurry past. Everyone busy, everyone living an ordinary day, while my entire world had just been turned inside out. I called David. He answered almost immediately. Ashley, I've got something. I leaned against the marble wall by the elevator. That night, David called again. His voice was rough, part smoke, part rage. Ashley, I traced 3 more names in the transaction history, all women, all inherited large estates. Each met him right after losing someone close. One lost her house and company. The second hanged herself in her garage, after he drained her trust fund. I closed my eyes. All the noise around me blurred, leaving only the sound of my own heavy breathing echoing inside my head. My chest ached, like someone had pressed a stone onto it. Not from fear of Jackson anymore, but from realizing I might have married a man who wasn't just a fraud, but a predator who systematically destroyed lives with precision. David's voice came again, quiet but cutting. Do you understand now, Ashley? This isn't betrayal or greed. This is a hunter. And you were just the next name on his list. I hung up, clenched my keys in my hand, and walked out of the building. Day 2. The war had shifted from boardrooms to the law, and I, the one who once trusted him most, was now the last person he should ever have crossed. That night, the phone vibrated on the glass table of the hotel room. I took a long breath, pushed my hair behind my ear as if he could see me, and answered, "Hey, babe." Jackson's voice came through, warm, a little husky, the kind of tone that once sounded comforting after a long day. "Where are you now? Still in your hotel room?" I smiled into the emptiness, my voice perfectly sweet, the way a wife sounds when she misses her husband. "Yeah, just got back to my room. The keynote went on forever. 3 hours on quantum encryption." He chuckled softly, that laugh that used to melt me. Now it just sounded rehearsed, fake enough to make my skin crawl. "That's so you," he said. "Always the hard-working one. Did you eat yet? Don't skip dinner like you always do." "I ate," I said, adding just the right amount of tiredness to my voice. "Chicken sandwich, but it's fine. The jet lag's killing me, though. I'm so sleepy." "Then sleep," he said gently. "I miss you so much. Woke up this morning without you beside me. Felt so empty." I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, just to keep from laughing out loud. "I miss you too," I whispered. "Just a few more days," he comforted me. "Hang in there. Conquer London for me. When you get back, I'll cook your favorite pasta, with extra mushrooms, okay? Can't wait, I replied, then let out a big yawn, perfectly timed. I'm so sleepy already, let me nap a bit. Got a panel tomorrow morning? You should rest too. Yeah, good night, babe. Dream of me. I hung up. The screen went black. I sat there in the dark hotel room, still gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Outside the window, the city glowed bright and alive. But in this room, the only sound was the steady, cold, mechanical rhythm of my heartbeat counting down. I stood outside Rory's apartment in Carroll Gardens at 6:40 p.m. The yellow light spilled halfway through the doorway, enough to show her shadow moving inside. The faint sound of a baby crying mixed with the heavy breathing of a mother just back from the hospital. When I knocked on her door, I made sure to sound calm, professional, hiding the storm burning inside me. 3 knocks, short, precise, unmistakable. The door opened slightly. Rory appeared, hair damp with sweat, collar of her shirt loose. She was nursing, her hand trembling, when she saw me standing there. Ah, Ashley? Her voice cracked, somewhere between panic and exhaustion. She opened the door wider and motioned for me to come in. The apartment looked nothing like I remembered. Everything in the room screamed luxury, and honestly, I knew not a single thing in there had been paid for with her own money. Ashley, she whispered, voice hoarse from crying. What are you doing here? I didn't let her finish. I lifted my phone and hit play. The video from yesterday at the hospital filled the room. Jackson in a blue scrub top, holding a newborn, kissing its forehead, then kissing Rory on the hospital bed. I said quietly, voice soft as air, but cold enough to freeze the room solid. She's adorable. Shame her father's about to go to prison, and her mother, if she doesn't cooperate, will leave her an orphan. The baby bottle slipped from Rory's hand, milk spreading across the wooden floor. She clutched the infant tighter, shaking. Ashley, what do you know? 2 women are dead, I continued, my voice steady, even though everything inside me was breaking loose, dead because of what Jackson did to them. How many more, Rory? How many lives has he destroyed? She backed toward the door, stammering, I don't know what you're talking about. You need to leave. I cut in, my tone low but sharp as metal on metal. I once called you my best friend for 18 years, I said, word by word. Now all I see is a gambler and a conman's whore. Get out of my apartment, she yelled, her voice shrill. Leave now or I'll call the police. I stood, not moving toward the door. I'd love to explain to them exactly what you and Jackson have done. Her hand hovered over the phone, but she didn't dial. I could see her thinking, calculating, and realizing every exit was already closed. Or, I continued, you could cooperate. Tell me everything, every detail of how he operates, every account where he hides money, every victim he's targeted. I placed a 3-inch thick folder on her coffee table. Bank transfers, old photos of the 2 of them from 6 years ago, Jackson's prison record, and pictures of the 2 women who'd taken their own lives. Your choice, I said evenly. Work with the district attorney's office, become a witness, or sit in a cell for 20 years beside him. Pick, Rory, I don't have all day. I looked straight at her. I need to make a call, she finally said, her voice missing the smooth confidence it had just minutes earlier. Go ahead, I replied, sitting back down. But remember, time's running out. She lifted the phone, but didn't dial. Instead, she stared at the baby in her arms, as if the child could answer the questions she didn't dare ask. When she finally spoke, her voice had softened. How long have you known? 5 days. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than calculation on her face. Fear. Real and raw. He lied to me too, she said quietly. He lied to both of us. That's what everyone believes, except the people helping me build the case against him against them. She flipped through the folder on the table. After a long silence, she said, I didn't know what he was. I just thought it was about money. I crouched down, looking straight into her eyes, You chose to sleep with my husband, have his child, and help him steal the house my parents left me. Rory looked up, face pale, tears and snot mixing together. I took one step closer, leaning down until she flinched. You have two choices, I said, glancing at the baby asleep in her arms. Think of that child right now. You're an accomplice. But if you turn on him first, you'll be a witness instead of another defendant. I stood, adjusted my jacket sleeves. At the door, I paused one last second, looking at the baby sleeping peacefully against her mother's chest. She's got his eyes, I said softly. Let's hope she won't have to pay for her parents' sins. Then I walked out, leaving behind the sound of the woman, who used to be my best friend, sobbing until her voice broke. That Monday morning, the morning I knew would mark a turning point in my life, the sky was the color of lead, thick with humidity, and the wind carried the weight of a storm that wasn't just outside, but inside the red brick house I had once called home. I got up at 5 a.m., put on the navy suit my father once said made people stand up when I entered a room. Today, I needed that exact feeling. I needed the strength he'd always seen in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. I parked across the street from the house at exactly 8:20, lowering the seat so I could watch without being seen. At 8:30 sharp, the door opened. Jackson stepped out, dressed like a man about to close the biggest deal of his life. The charcoal suit I had given him for our second anniversary, the polished Italian shoes. His hair slicked neatly back, leather portfolio in hand, the kind he reserved for important meetings. He looked successful, confident, full of purpose, like someone about to claim the reward of a 5-year con. I started the engine, trailing him from 2 blocks behind. The first stop, just as I'd predicted, was the bank in Cobble Hill, where today Jackson planned to finalize his paperwork. He walked in with the gait of a man who believed he was untouchable. Less than 3 minutes later, he came out. Even from a distance, I saw the change. His confident stride shortened into sharp, uneven steps, jolted, uncertain. The phone was at his ear before he even finished swearing. What? No way! They said there's a court order. Who filed it? Who? I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes for a second. Martin had done his part. The bank's legal department had been alerted. The fake subsidiary accounts were frozen. The foreclosure stopped with a single signature from a Sunday night duty Judge Jackson, who once thought he was directing the entire play, was now just another actor running in panic across a burning stage. He drove straight home, fast enough to nearly run a red light I followed, parking a few houses away. When I entered, I made sure to step hard on the third stair, the one that always creaked. Upstairs, his voice cut off mid-sentence. No, I told you, my wife's in lawn. Silence. When I reached the doorway of his office, he was frozen mid-call, the phone still in his hand, his face drained of color like he'd just seen a ghost. Ashley? What are you doing here? Why aren't you in London? I stood at the threshold. Didn't move closer. Didn't need to. My voice was calm enough to chill the air. I didn't go to London, Jackson. I came back for my passport and found out you have a child with my best friend. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Like a fish gasping on dry land, I went on before he could spin another lie. I know everything, 6 years of it. Every word, every move, every plan. His face shifted fast, like a trained actor switching scenes. Panic, pleading, blame, threat. You're misunderstanding. Let me explain. I don't need to hear it. I took half a step forward, just enough for the window light to fall across my face. You only got one thing wrong, Jackson. I met his eyes. You thought you married a rich, naive woman. I paused long enough to see his throat tighten. But actually, I whispered, you married a chief risk officer. The last words came slow, clear. And my job is to hunt high-level threats. I tilted my head slightly. And you, Jackson, you are the highest threat I've ever faced. At that moment, sirens. Police lights flashed blue and red against the walls. Jackson turned, his face draining as the reflection hit the glass. A heavy knock thundered at the front door. He lunged toward me, but it was too late. The door burst open. Two officers stepped in, cuffs glinting in their hands. He looked at me. Panic, disbelief, desperation, the wild stare of a trapped animal, realizing the cage is already shut. As they pulled him away, he turned one last time, voice breaking. I did love you, at least in the beginning. I looked him straight in the eye, steady and unblinking. No, that was never real. I stood there, silent, as they led him down the stairs, head down, face pale, the expensive suit hanging limp, cheap in defeat. When the brownstone door closed behind the police, I finally exhaled. Not in relief, not in victory, but in emptiness. A hollow space where love used to live, where trust used to breathe. And inside that hollow, I felt something rise. A strong, steady silence. A new kind of certainty. And I knew. This was what freedom sounded like. 3 months later. Rory stood in the witness room under the glare of the camera, her shoulders trembling, but her words clear. Every small detail I'd once only heard over the phone was now solid evidence. The late-night texts she sent to Jackson, the hotel bills, the times she withdrew cash to hand to their so-called partner. Each admission came like a knife cut, slicing open the layers of deceit they'd built together. When she said, I was scared. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked, but every signature she placed on the cooperation order froze Jackson's entire defense in its tracks. Then, like dominoes falling, 4 more women came forward. Emails, calls, screenshots, and receipts they'd been too afraid to share before. One after another, a network of victims whose stories stitched together the truth. Jackson wasn't just a con artist. He was the orchestrator of a deliberate criminal enterprise. The court moved slowly into sentencing. When the judge finally spoke, 18 years, the sound of the gavel echoed like a full stop carved into stone. No bail, no escape, no excuses. During the investigation and financial audit, the forensic accountants worked like miners, tracing every wire, every transfer, every shadow of a dollar. In the end, we recovered roughly 80% of what had been stolen. I stood inside the bank office as they signed the last of the restitution documents, the smell of ink sharp in the air, the soft sound of pages turning, and felt my eyes sting. Not entirely from joy. Thornsecure was different. Instead of collapsing under whispers and client doubt, we turned the pain into something public, a lesson. I wrote a case study called Social Engineering from the Victim's Perspective, detailing exactly how trust had been exploited and how organizations could build immunity from within. The talk made its way across cybersecurity conferences, from small midtown meeting rooms to grand auditoriums in Boston. The woman who had once been attacked now stood in front of crowds, turning her own scars into armor. At home, healing didn't come quickly. I still slept less, checked emails at midnight, and sometimes startled at the sound of the doorbell. But there were small, steady steps forward. I started seeing a trauma therapist, attended support groups with others who had lived through the same kind of betrayal, and found that telling the story didn't just lighten the pain, it transformed it into power. 2 years later, in my new apartment on the Upper West Side, a space bathed in morning light, where the sun poured soft layers of gold across the wooden floor, as if repainting my life in gentler tones. The large window opened to a city slowly waking up. The distant hum of traffic, the wind rustling through the park trees, the sound of peace I once believed I'd never find again. After that storm, I set my teacup on the table and walked toward the mirror hanging beside the window. The old oak frame I'd found in a thrift shop, because I liked the idea of something cracked being used to begin again. The reflection staring back wasn't the same woman who had stood at the foot of the stairs that day, a woman trembling, gasping for breath, shattered by a whisper from the 3rd floor. There were no more swollen eyes from crying, no more fists clenched white with fear. There was only me, the version that survived, that stood back up, that learned how to name her pain without letting it consume her during that week of investigation. I lost the baby. Stress, adrenaline, sleepless nights, and the kind of collapse you can't explain to anyone. But I chose not to say it aloud, because that pain belonged to me alone, a grief whose weight only I could measure. The sunlight slid across the mirror, grazing my face, making me look like someone pieced together from shards that had been carefully smoothed over. My lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind that doesn't come from fleeting happiness, but from quiet acceptance. Today, there was no woman sobbing over two pink lines, no one standing in a hallway, listening to her heart crack into pieces. Only a woman who had learned to dress her own wounds, to stand, to move forward. A woman who knew exactly what her worth was and would never, ever let anyone take it from her again. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sunlight press against my eyelids like a soft touch of healing somewhere below. A bus screeched, a short horn sounded, then faded, and I realized the world was still moving on. Calm, unhurried. I opened my eyes, feeling lighter, as if the weight of the last 2 years had been set down somewhere behind me. I smiled. A smile for the version of me from 2 years ago. A smile for anyone listening now, wondering if they can stand again after their own storm. The answer is yes, right here, right in this breath. I turned toward the window, opened it, and let the morning wind rush in, scattering a few papers on the table. Gently, not chaotically, like it was playing, "Which moment in this story made you hold your breath the most?" Leave a comment below. And if you want to hear more journeys of strength like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for the next story.